Hey, it's me, your boy Blue Gets again, and today I'll be doing my Yu-Gi-Oh! Tier analysis. And right now I'm going to be doing it on Dangers. Dangers, if you don't know, they were a TCG exclusive archetype, and they like to draw a lot. They like to reveal themselves, your opponent plays a guessing game, and if they guess wrong, you get to special summon that monster, and you get to draw and discard whatever they clicked on. Also, each of your monsters have an effect when discarded. And yeah, the deck isn't as great as it sounds. It it's mainly great as an engine. Anyways, let's get right into this. For the pros, it is versatile when it comes to discard options or discard effects. This deck can swarm if you're lucky. I should just put that. Yeah, I guess I should specify that if you're lucky. It has great draw power if you're lucky, but you tend to run a lot of draw cards in dangers. The effects to reveal themselves in hand aren't hard ones per turn, which is good, meaning that if your opponent decides to Ash Blossom, you can just do it again. And this deck has decent spells and traps. Kinda. And I say kinda because some of their spells and traps, half of the spells and traps suck, and I guess there's one, the search card. It is very unusable at the moment because it locks you into danger monsters, and yeah, it's like it allows you to fetch smaller danger monsters, but there's no point in fetching smaller danger monsters because yeah, you're just locked into dangers, so you can't really link summon since as I'm going to mention later, this deck doesn't have any archetypal extra deck monsters. They suck as a pure variant for that very reason. They don't have an extra deck. They don't have extra deck monsters to work with. It would be cool because there's a lot of cryptids out there that Konami can still make, danger cards off of, just like how there are still more tarot cards that Konami can make more Arcana Force support off of. But I'm not going to be talking about Arcana Force right now. I'm just going to be talking about Danger as well as the other decks I'm going to talk about in this video. Because they don't have any way of actually making use of some of their spells and traps as well as their own monster effects, they just suck as a pure variant, and they work really well as an engine. They lack an archetypal link monster, like I mentioned already, and this deck is very luck based or fairly luck based because your opponent still has a high chance of guessing wrong, thus allowing you to special summon and draw a card. But but sometimes how it goes is your opponent guesses right like twice and you kind of lose, or your opponent constantly guesses wrong and you just get to go crazy essentially. And that's kind of how this deck goes, and I'm going to be merciful and give it a tier 3. Why? Because this deck has, they have a few good boss monsters in the form of Bigfoot and Thunderbird, meaning you can summon them and they're just big beaters that you can actually get out of your hand fairly easily. So that's the only reason I'm saying it's tier 3, otherwise I would have lowered it down to tier 3.5. Oh, and I skipped Triamids because I was supposed to be doing that first. Anyways, next we have Triamids. This is an archetype that hasn't gotten support in basically ever since it came out, essentially. I think this archetype came out in the same set that Shiranui's came out in, and this archetype is very, very like this archetype is very neglected, essentially. And it's basically just gotten hit over the years because terraforming went to 1. Anyways, this is going to be short for the pros. we have cool boss monster, that being Sphinx, and rock support because we've been getting rock support, which is cool, but they don't work too well with Trimids, so there's that. They don't have enough Trimid monsters because this deck only has like this deck only has four monsters. Sphinx, they have the Hunter as well as Master and one other card whose name I forgot, but yeah, also nearly forgot. The gimmick of this deck is they like to shuffle around their field spells, and their field spells have effects when they get popped and not popped, but at least sent to the graveyard. And all of your low-level Triamid monsters have this effect that allows you to shuffle through your field spells during your opponent's turn, which is how you're supposed to get off these effects, but because this deck doesn't have any searcher, and they have little to no searchers, and they have very few monsters, they aren't really able to actually do what they need to do properly. Which is one thing I forgot to put on the cons list. They don't have no Triamid monsters, obviously. They have decent, bad field spells. They have three field spells. One of them is good, I guess, or at least good by Triamid standards. And the other one's decent, and the, the last one is just terrible. I wish this deck got more support because I feel like Konami can easily make this deck a lot better. Just give them more Tri-Mid monsters and give them more field spells and more searchers. And I feel like this deck can easily go up to tier 2.5 just like that because it has a really cool premise. It's just really, really inconsistent and it's very slow. And I already mentioned the two like losing two terraformings as well as set rotations, so that kind of hinders the deck a lot. So I'd give it a tier 4 because if you're going against a very slow deck, you might actually have a chance. And lastly, I want to talk about Ancient Warriors. I mentioned this deck in my favorite decks video because I actually enjoy playing this deck a lot. I plan on making a dual video with this once again. Anyways, this video might get too long, so I'm just going to rush through it. For the pros, we have great boss monsters. What can I say about that? Anyways, they have great battle protection, which is really great because there's also this loop. If you get two of certain ancient warriors on the field, your opponent cannot declare an attack, period. Plus, your trap card can also buy you time, which is also really cool. And I like how it can summon something from deck, so it kind of punishes your opponent for trying to attack you for game. This deck is fairly consistent because you have your triple tanky, you have your 3 visits, as well as you have those two monsters I mentioned that form a lock. Like one allows you to special summon monsters from deck if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, and one allows you to search if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, which is honestly really amazing. And this deck can easily swarm because a lot of the monsters have special summon effects, and yeah. Also, I forgot to mention this deck can potentially OTK. They don't do it too often, but they can do it. And for cons, they can't play through many negates, that's obvious, and they lose to monster removal. Because this deck is very battle oriented. So your opponent can just Regeki you or spot removal and ruin your day. But they can't. I guess technically you do have some protection because I think you have one that protects you from being targeted by card effects, but I forgot which one that is. Battle-wise, this deck can actually triumph over your opponent more times than none. Yeah, actually, now when I think about it, I did talk about how I like this deck and how battle-oriented it is, and how It's an interesting deck because it has a lot of monsters. They have a lot of support, and they're able to manipulate your opponent's stats fairly well, which is why I would say it's a tier 2.5 because it's basically like almost like Performer Pals, but better in almost every way. So yeah, it's like tier 2.5. Anyways, it's me, your boy Blue Gatsuga, and I'm out.